I spent 22 years saving every dollar I earned as a nurse at St. Vincent Hospital in Portland. 22 years of double shifts, skipped meals, and walking to work in the rain to save on bus fare. All of it for one dream: a home. Not just any home. My home. A Victorian house on Hawthorne Street that I bought in 1954 for $8,200. It was falling apart when I got it, but it was mine. When my daughter Rebecca came back to me in 1964, pregnant, bruised, and running from a husband who hit her, I didn't hesitate. I opened my door and said, "Your room's still the same." She stayed. My granddaughter Emma was born that winter, and for a while, we were a family. The house aged with us. The roof leaked. The plumbing groaned. The floors warped. By 1976, Rebecca was right. The place was falling apart. She convinced me to fix it. "Do it for Emma," she said. "She deserves a nice house." So I did. I wrote check after check, watching my life savings disappear. $23,000 in total. New floors, new plumbing, new roof. 4 months of living in the basement while strangers tore my home apart and rebuilt it into something beautiful. Something Rebecca chose every detail of, from the pale yellow paint to the modern kitchen appliances. The day the work finished, Rebecca handed me a piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked. "The deed to the house. I had it transferred to my name last year. I didn't want to bother you with the paperwork." My heart stopped. "I think it's time you found your own place, Mom," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. "Emma and I need space. You understand, don't you? You can take whatever furniture you want, but I need you out by the end of the month." I stared at my daughter, this woman who looked like me but sounded like a stranger, and I realized she'd planned this all along. She'd transferred the deed before the renovation. She'd convinced me to spend my life savings fixing up a house she'd already stolen from me. And now that it was beautiful, now that it was worth something, she wanted me gone. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded and went upstairs to pack. But that night, alone in the basement, I remembered something. When I bought the house in 1954, the previous owner, an elderly Polish man named Mr. Kowalski, had been forgetful. The deed transfer was signed, but it was never properly filed with the county. For 22 years, I'd paid the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, never knowing that legally, the house had never actually been transferred to me, which meant Rebecca's deed, based on a transfer from me to her, was worthless, which meant the house belonged to no one. Or, if I wanted to fight for it, it still belonged to me. I sat there in that dark basement, holding the yellowed, unfiled deed in my hands, and I had a choice to make. I could destroy her. I could take her to court, prove her deed was invalid, force her and Emma out of the house she'd stolen from me. I could make her feel every bit of the betrayal I was feeling. Justice, revenge, whatever you want to call it. It was mine for the taking, or I could walk away. I could let her have the house, let her think she'd won, and try to salvage whatever scraps of a relationship we had left. For Emma's sake, if not for Rebecca's. I'm 63 years old. I've worked my entire life. I've sacrificed everything for my daughter, and she repaid me by stealing my home and throwing me out like garbage. I have every legal right to take back what's mine. But here's what I keep thinking about. My father used to say, "Never sign anything without reading it twice." He also said, "Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing." I moved into a small apartment near the hospital. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, thin walls. I left most of my furniture behind. I started my new life, but I kept that deed. And every night I sit in my reading chair and stare at it, and I ask myself the same question. What kind of person do I want to be? The kind who fights for what's rightfully hers, who makes her daughter pay for her betrayal, who teaches her that actions have consequences, or the kind who forgives the unforgivable, who chooses mercy over justice, who breaks the cycle of hurt even when it costs everything. I call Emma every night at 7. She cries and asks when I'm coming home. Rebecca answers the phone with cold politeness, counting down the minutes until our conversation ends. And I can hear it in her voice. She thinks she's gotten away with it. She thinks I'm just going to disappear quietly, like I always have. She doesn't know about the deed. She doesn't know that I hold her entire life in my hands. She doesn't know that one phone call to a lawyer could take everything from her. And she definitely doesn't know that I'm trying to decide if destroying her would destroy me too. I spent 22 years building a home. Now I have to decide, do I tear it down to prove a point? Or do I let it stand, even if I can never live in it again? They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But nobody talks about what it costs you to serve it. Nobody talks about the difference between justice and mercy, between what you deserve and what you choose to give. Nobody talks about what happens when the person who hurt you most is the person you love most. I have the deed. I have the power. I have every right to make her pay. The question is, should I? Because once I make this choice, there's no going back. Once I decide who I'm going to be, the mother who forgives or the woman who fights, I have to live with that person for the rest of my life, and I don't know which version of myself I can live with. The deed sits in a metal lockbox in my closet. Every day I open it. Every day I stare at that yellowed piece of paper. Every day I imagine walking into a lawyer's office and saying, "I want my house back." And every day I imagine Emma's face when she finds out her grandmother destroyed her mother. Time's running out. Rebecca's getting comfortable in her stolen house. She's buying new furniture, probably with money she forged from my account. Another thing I discovered too late. She's settling in, building a life on the foundation of my sacrifice. And I'm sitting in this apartment, holding a piece of paper that could change everything, trying to figure out if winning would feel like victory or just another kind of loss. I don't know how this story ends yet, but I know it ends soon. And whatever I decide, forgiveness or revenge, mercy or justice, will define the rest of my life. The house on Hawthorne Street is still standing, beautiful now, with its fresh paint and new roof and solid floors. The question is, who gets to live in it? The woman who stole it? Or the woman who built it? I'm about to find out. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with the house on Hawthorne Street. It was October 1954, and the maple trees lining the sidewalk had turned that particular shade of red gold that only exists in Portland autumns. The real estate agent, a thin woman named Mrs. Helmsley, who wore too much rouge and smelled like mothballs, kept apologizing as she fumbled with the key. "It needs work," she said for the third time. Quite a bit of work, actually. I didn't care. The moment I stepped onto that crooked porch, I felt something shift inside my chest. The house was a Victorian lady who'd fallen on hard times, peeling white paint, shutters hanging askew, a front door that stuck in its frame. But the bones were good. The windows, though dirty, still had their original wavy glass. The gingerbread trim, though rotted in places, spoke of a time when people built homes to last. "I'll take it," I said. Mrs. Helmsley blinked. "Don't you want to see the inside first?" "I'll take it," I repeated. I was 31 years old. I'd been working as a nurse at St. Vincent Hospital for 9 years, ever since Rebecca's father died in a logging accident up near Astoria. I'd lived in a cramped apartment on Burnside Street, where the walls were so thin I could hear the couple next door arguing about money every Thursday night, like clockwork. I'd saved every penny I could, skipping meals, mending my uniforms until they were more patch than fabric, walking to work, even in the rain. This house cost $8,200. It might as well have been $1 million. I signed the papers 3 weeks later in Mr. Kowalski's kitchen. He was the seller, a Polish immigrant in his 80s who'd lived in the house since 1923. His hands shook as he signed, and he kept stopping to cough into a handkerchief that had seen better days. "You take care of her," he said, his accent still thick despite decades in America. "She's good house, strong." "I will," I promised. He died 2 months later. Heart failure, the obituary said. I went to his funeral at St. Stanislaus, lit a candle, and prayed for his soul. I didn't know him well, but he'd given me something precious, a place to belong. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that Mr. Kowalski's signature on those papers was the last official thing he did before his mind started to slip. The deed transfer, which should have been filed with Multnomah County within 30 days, somehow never made it into the system. His nephew, who handled the estate, assumed everything was in order. I assumed the same. For 22 years, I lived in a house I thought I owned. And in every way that mattered, I did. Rebecca was 12 when we moved in. She hated it immediately. "It smells like old people," she said, wrinkling her nose as we carried boxes through the front door. "It smells like home," I corrected. "Give it time." She didn't. She spent her teenage years complaining about the house. The creaky stairs, the drafty windows, the bathroom with its clawfoot tub and rust stains that wouldn't come out no matter how much bleach I used. Her friends lived in newer houses in the suburbs, ranch-style places with carports and modern kitchens. Our house was old, eccentric, difficult. Like me, I suppose. I worked nights mostly 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., which meant I saw Rebecca in passing, her leaving for school as I came home, her asleep when I left for my shift. We communicated through notes left on the kitchen table. "There's meatloaf in the fridge. I need $3 for the field trip. Don't wait up." I told myself we were fine, that this was just how it was for working mothers, that she understood I was doing my best. I was wrong on all counts. She met Frank Cassidy when she was 19. He was 26, a contractor who specialized in basement renovations and had a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. He showed up at our door one Saturday in the spring of 1961, clipboard in hand, saying he'd noticed our foundation looked questionable, and would I like a free estimate? I said no. Rebecca, home from her secretarial job, said yes. 6 months later, they were married at the courthouse. I wasn't invited. I found out when she showed up to pack her things, a thin gold band on her finger and defiance in her eyes. "You didn't even tell me," I said, standing in the doorway of her bedroom, watching her fold clothes into a suitcase. "You would have tried to stop me. I would have wanted to be there." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Pity. "Mom," she said softly, "you're never there." The words hit like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, to list all the sacrifices I'd made, all the double shifts I'd worked, all the times I'd gone without so she could have. But the words stuck in my throat. She left that afternoon. I stood on the porch and watched Frank's truck disappear down Hawthorne Street, and I felt the house settle around me like a coat I'd forgotten I was wearing. For the first time in years, I was alone. The thing about working nights in a hospital is that you see humanity at its worst and its best, often within the same hour. You see the drunk driver who killed a family of 4, crying and begging for forgiveness. You see the mother who stays by her child's bedside for 72 hours straight, singing lullabies even though the doctors say her son can't hear her. You see death and birth, rage and grace, all under the fluorescent lights of corridors that smell like disinfectant and desperation. I became good at my job because I learned to separate myself from the pain, to see wounds as problems to solve, bodies as machines to fix. I could insert an IV on the first try, even in elderly patients with collapsed veins. I could calm violent patients with schizophrenia, talking them down from psychotic breaks with a voice steady as a metronome. I could tell which patients would make it through the night and which ones wouldn't, just by the way they breathed. But I couldn't fix my relationship with my daughter. 3 years passed. I heard about Rebecca through the grapevine. She was working at Meyer and Frank, selling cosmetics. Frank's contracting business was struggling. They'd moved into a rental house in Gresham. She never called. I told myself it was better this way, that she needed space to figure out her life, that she'd come back when she was ready. I was half right. It was December 1964 when she showed up at my door, 8 months pregnant and crying so hard she couldn't speak. Her left eye was swollen shut, and there were bruises on her arms in the shape of fingerprints. I didn't ask questions. I just pulled her inside, sat her down at the kitchen table, and made her tea the way I always had. Too much sugar, a splash of milk, served in the blue cup that had been her favorite as a child. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Hush," I said. "You're home now." Emma was born on January 14th, 1965, during a snowstorm that shut down half of Portland. I delivered her myself right there in the bedroom that used to be Rebecca's, because the roads were too icy to risk the drive to the hospital. I'd delivered hundreds of babies in my career, but none that made my hands shake like Emma did. She came out screaming, red-faced and furious, and when I placed her in Rebecca's arms, I saw my daughter's face transform. All the hardness, all the anger, all the disappointment, it melted away like snow in sunshine. "Hi, baby," Rebecca whispered. "Hi, little love." I stood at the foot of the bed, covered in blood and afterbirth, and felt something crack open inside my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was bigger than that. It was hope. Frank showed up 2 days later, sober and apologetic, with a bouquet of wilted carnations from the Safeway. He stood on the porch in the cold, shifting from foot to foot, looking like a schoolboy sent to the principal's office. "I want to see my daughter," he said. Rebecca, still weak from the delivery, looked at me from where she lay on the couch. I saw the question in her eyes. "No," I said to Frank. Not cruelly, just firmly. "Not today." He left. He came back the next week. And the week after that. Each time I turned him away. Each time Rebecca looked relieved. He stopped coming in March. The divorce was finalized that summer. Rebecca never went back. The years that followed were the happiest of my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. Rebecca got her job back at Meyer and Frank, working the early shift so she could be home by dinner. I switched to the night shift permanently, which meant I could watch Emma during the day while Rebecca worked. We fell into a routine. I'd come home at 7:30 a.m., exhausted and aching, to find Emma already awake, sitting in her high chair, banging a spoon against the tray. Rebecca would have breakfast ready, usually oatmeal or toast, nothing fancy. And she'd brief me on Emma's night like I was the incoming nurse on a shift change. She woke up twice, once for her pacifier, once because she had a nightmare. "What about?" "Monsters in the closet." I'd nod, file the information away, and take over. Rebecca would leave for work, and Emma and I would have the whole day to ourselves. I taught her everything. How to tie her shoes. Bunny ears, always bunny ears. How to make scrambled eggs. Low heat, constant stirring. How to identify birds by their calls. Robins sound cheerful, crows sound angry. We'd walk to Laurelhurst Park and feed the ducks, or to the library where Mrs. Chen, the children's librarian, would save the new picture books for us. Emma called me Grammy, and every time she said it, I felt like I'd been given a gift I didn't deserve. Rebecca and I didn't talk much about the past. We existed in the present, in the mundane rhythms of meals and bedtimes and laundry. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me across the dinner table with an expression I couldn't read, something between gratitude and resentment. But before I could ask, she'd look away. We didn't go to Mass regularly, though we were both baptized Catholic. I'd fallen out of the habit during my nursing training, when Sunday mornings were more often than not spent sleeping off a night shift. But sometimes when I was particularly tired or troubled, I'd slip into St. Mary's Cathedral during a quiet hour and light a candle. I never knew quite what to pray for, so I'd just sit there in the silence, letting the cool air and the smell of incense settle over me like a blessing. I always felt better afterward, even if nothing had changed. Emma started kindergarten in 1970. She was 5 years old, all skinny legs and missing teeth, with Rebecca's dark hair and my green eyes. I walked her to Buckman Elementary that first day, holding her hand too tightly, fighting the urge to turn around and take her home. "You're going to love it," I said, trying to sound confident. "What if I don't?" she asked. "Then we'll figure it out together." She did love it, of course. She made friends easily, throwing herself into the chaos of the playground with the kind of fearlessness I'd never possessed. Within a week, she was coming home with stories about Melissa and Jamal and Mrs. Peterson, who let them have extra recess if they finished their math worksheets early. I was proud of her, but I also felt something else, something I didn't want to name. Loss. She didn't need me the way she used to. She had a whole world now, beyond our house, beyond our routines, and I was left with more time than I knew what to do with. That's when I started to notice the house falling apart. The roof had developed a leak over the upstairs bathroom. Water stains bloomed on the ceiling like bruises. The plumbing groaned and rattled every time someone turned on a faucet. The front porch steps had started to sag, and I'd put off fixing them so long that Rebecca now refused to use them, entering through the back door instead. "This place is falling apart, Mom," she said one evening, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. She'd just gotten home from work, still wearing her Meyer and Frank name tag. "It's embarrassing. It's old," I said. "Old houses make noise. Old houses also collapse if you don't take care of them." She wasn't wrong. I'd been putting off repairs for years, telling myself I'd get to them eventually, always finding something more important to spend money on. Emma's school supplies, Rebecca's car repairs, the gas bill, the electric bill, the never-ending parade of bills that consumed my paychecks. But Rebecca was right. The house was dying around us. It was February 1976 when Rebecca first suggested the renovation. We were sitting at the kitchen table finishing dinner, pork chops and mashed potatoes, the same meal I'd been making since she was a child. Emma was upstairs doing homework. The house was quiet except for the old radiator hissing in the corner. "I've been thinking," Rebecca said, not looking at me, "about the house. What about it? We should fix it up, really fix it up. New floors, new plumbing, new roof. Make it nice." I set down my fork. "That would cost." "I know what it would cost," she interrupted. "But think about it, Mom. This place could be beautiful. And Emma's getting older. She deserves a nice house, not..." She gestured vaguely at the peeling wallpaper, the cracked linoleum. "This." There it was again. That tone. The one that suggested I'd failed somehow. That my best hadn't been good enough. "I don't have that kind of money," I said quietly. "You have savings. That's for emergencies." "Mom." She looked at me then, and her eyes were hard. "This is an emergency. Look around. The house is literally falling apart. If we don't fix it now, it's going to be worthless." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that the house had held us for 22 years, that it had weathered Rebecca's teenage rebellion and Emma's birth and countless rainstorms, that it was more than the sum of its repairs. But when I looked around the kitchen, at the water stain spreading across the ceiling, at the cabinet door that hung crooked on its hinges, at the floor that sloped noticeably toward the back door, I couldn't deny she was right. "How much?" I asked. 20,000, maybe 25. But my entire savings account held 23,400, the product of 2 decades of sacrifice, carefully deposited, barely touched. It was supposed to be for Emma's college, for a real emergency, for the future. "I'll think about it," I said. But we both knew I'd already decided. I started getting estimates the next week. I called contractors from the Yellow Pages, men with gruff voices, who showed up in dirty trucks and walked through the house with clipboards, making notes and sucking air through their teeth. "You've got dry rot in the porch," one said. "Foundations settling on the west side," said another. "Plumbing's original. Jesus, that's a disaster waiting to happen." Each one gave me a number that made my stomach drop. But Rebecca kept pushing. "It's an investment, Mom," she said. "Once it's fixed up, the house will be worth so much more. You'll see." I should have asked more questions. I should have asked who would own that increased value. But I didn't, because I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that by fixing the house, I was fixing us. Patching the cracks in our relationship the same way I'd patch the cracks in the walls. I was 63 years old, and I was still trying to buy my daughter's love. In April, I wrote the checks. I hired Brennan & Sons Construction, a company I chose because they shared my last name, and that felt like a good omen. I signed the contracts, set up the payment schedule, and watched my savings account dwindle like water circling a drain. The work began in May. Construction is chaos given physical form. The house filled with dust and noise and strangers tramping through rooms that had been private for decades. They tore up the old floors, ripped out the plumbing, gutted the kitchen down to its studs. Every day I came home from my shift to find the house further disassembled, like someone was slowly erasing my memories. Rebecca and Emma moved in with Frank's mother across town. "Just until the work is done," Rebecca said, which left me alone in the house, living in the basement among boxes and sheet-covered furniture, listening to the sound of hammers and drills echoing through the walls. I worked my shifts at the hospital and came home to a construction site. I ate dinner standing up in what used to be the kitchen, heating canned soup on a hot plate. I showered at the hospital. I slept on a cot surrounded by the ghosts of my old life. The workers were kind enough. They'd wave when they saw me, offer to move something if I needed access. The foreman, a man named Pete with forearms like hams, would update me on the progress. "Coming along real nice, Mrs. Brennan," he'd say. "You won't recognize the place when we're done." He was right. I didn't. By September, the house was transformed. The new hardwood floors gleamed. The kitchen had sleek modern appliances, white cabinets with gold hardware, a sink that actually drained properly. The bathroom had new tile, a new toilet, a new vanity. The roof no longer leaked. The plumbing no longer groaned. Rebecca had chosen all the finishes, the paint colors, the fixtures, the light switches. I'd been too exhausted to have an opinion, so I'd let her make the decisions. She picked a pale yellow for the exterior, bright white for the interior, with touches of mint green in the kitchen. "It looks like a dream," she said when she came to see the finished product. "Oh, Mom, it's perfect." She was right. It was perfect. It just didn't feel like mine anymore. Rebecca and Emma moved back in on a Saturday in late September. I helped carry boxes up from Frank's mother's car, my back aching with each trip up the porch steps. Emma ran through the rooms, squealing with delight at her new pink bedroom, at the bathroom with its modern shower, at the kitchen where everything sparkled. "Can we bake cookies, Grammy?" she asked, her eyes bright. "Of course," I said, though I wasn't sure where anything was anymore. That evening after Emma was asleep, Rebecca and I sat in the living room. She was drinking wine from one of the new glasses she'd bought at Meyer and Frank, with her employee discount. I was drinking tea from my old blue cup, the only thing that hadn't changed. "Thank you, Mom," she said quietly, "for doing this, for all of it. You're welcome." She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I need to show you something," she said. My heart started to beat faster, though I didn't know why. "What is it?" "The deed to the house. I had it transferred to my name last year. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry about the paperwork. I stared at her. Transferred? You're getting older, Mom. I thought it would be easier this way. For taxes and things. You understand, right? I took the paper from her hand, with fingers that had gone numb. The words swam on the page. Rebecca Ann Cassidy, sole owner, Multnomah County. When did you do this? I asked. Last March, right before we started the renovation. I thought... She paused. I thought it made sense. I looked at her, at this woman who looked so much like me but thought so differently, and I realized with a clarity that felt like falling that she'd been planning this all along. Mom, she said, and her voice had changed, harder now, businesslike. I think it's time we talked about your living situation. My living situation? This house is too big for all of us. And honestly, it's hard having you here. Emma needs space. I need space. You're always... Here. The words hung in the air like smoke. You want me to leave? I said. Not a question. I think it would be better for everyone. You could find a nice apartment near the hospital, closer to work. It would be easier for you. You want me to leave, I repeated. She looked away. You can take whatever furniture you want, but I need you out by the end of the month. I sat there in the house I'd bought, in the house I'd paid to renovate, in the house that no longer legally belonged to me, and I felt something inside me break. Not my heart. That had broken before. This was something deeper. This was the breaking of an illusion I'd carried for 63 years, that love was enough, that sacrifice meant something, that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, worked enough, I could make my daughter love me the way I loved her. Okay, I said. Rebecca blinked. Okay? I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. She looked relieved. Guilty, but relieved. Thank you for understanding. I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway. That night I lay in my bed, in what had been my bed for 22 years, and stared at the ceiling. The new ceiling, smooth and perfect, with no water stains. I thought about Mr. Kowalski, signing papers with shaking hands. I thought about all the times I'd walked past the county office downtown, meaning to check on the deed transfer, never quite finding the time. I thought about the metal lockbox in the basement, and I thought about my father, who died when I was 17, who worked in the shipyards and came home every night smelling like metal and sweat. He'd been a quiet man, not given to long speeches or lessons, but he'd told me one thing I'd never forgotten. Dottie, he'd said, using the nickname no one else used, never sign anything without reading it twice, and never trust that someone else did the job right. Always check. I'd forgotten that advice. For 22 years I'd forgotten, but I remembered now. I got out of bed, put on my robe, and went down to the basement. The lockbox was still there, behind the old Christmas decorations and Emma's baby clothes I'd never been able to throw away. I opened it with the key I kept on a chain around my neck, a habit from my nursing days, when keys were how you kept medications safe. Inside were all the documents of my life, my marriage certificate, Rebecca's birth certificate, my nursing license, insurance papers, and at the very bottom, yellowed and brittle, the original deed to the house on Hawthorne Street. I pulled it out carefully and read it by the light of the single bulb hanging from the basement ceiling. The deed was made out to Joseph Kowalski. There was a signature line at the bottom, where he'd signed the transfer to Dorothy Brennan. But at the top, in the official stamp section, there was nothing. No county seal, no filing date, no recorder's signature. The deed had never been officially transferred, which meant, legally, the house still belonged to Joseph Kowalski's estate, which meant Rebecca's deed, based on a transfer from me to her, was invalid, which meant the house belonged to no one. Or, if I wanted to push it, if I wanted to be ruthless, if I wanted to take what was rightfully mine, it still belonged to me. I sat there in the basement, holding that piece of paper, and I felt 1,000 different things at once. Anger, vindication, sorrow, and underneath it all, a question I didn't want to answer. What kind of person does it make me if I use this? What kind of mother? I thought about Rebecca upstairs, sleeping in her new bedroom, in her newly renovated house, probably feeling relieved that she'd finally gotten rid of the burden of her aging mother. I thought about Emma, innocent in all of this, dreaming in her pink room. I thought about justice and mercy, about what we owe each other, about the difference between what's legal and what's right. And I realized I didn't know the answer. Not yet, but I would figure it out. I folded the deed carefully, put it back in the lockbox, and went back upstairs. I had until the end of the month to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. I found an apartment 3 days later. It wasn't much. A 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building near the hospital, with thin walls and a radiator that clanked like someone was hitting it with a wrench. The landlord, a weary-looking man named Mr. Petrova, showed me around with the enthusiasm of someone giving a tour of a morgue. "Hot water's iffy after 8 p.m., he said. "Trash pickups on Thursdays. No pets, no subletting, no painting without permission." "I'll take it," I said. He looked surprised. "You don't want to think about it?" "No." I signed the lease that afternoon. Move-in date, October 1st, 4 days away. I went back to the house on Hawthorne Street and started packing. Not everything, just what I'd need. Clothes, a few books, my nursing uniforms, the blue teacup. I left the furniture, the photo albums, the accumulated weight of 22 years. Rebecca watched me from the doorway of my bedroom, Emma clinging to her leg. "Where are you going, Grammy?" Emma asked. She was 6 years old, still young enough to believe that adults always told the truth. "Grammy's getting her own place," Rebecca said before I could answer. "Isn't that exciting? She'll have her own apartment." "But why?" Emma's lower lip trembled. "Don't you like living with us?" I knelt down, my knees protesting, and took her small hands in mine. "I love living with you," I said. "But sometimes grown-ups need their own space. I'll still see you all the time, I promise." It was a lie. I could see it in Rebecca's face. She had no intention of letting me back into their lives, more than absolutely necessary. But Emma didn't need to know that yet. "Can I visit you?" Emma asked. "Of course you can." Rebecca pulled Emma back. "We'll see, baby. Grammy's going to be very busy with work." I stood up, my back aching, and met Rebecca's eyes. There was something there I couldn't quite read. Not quite guilt, not quite triumph, something in between. "I'll be out by Friday," I said. "Thank you, Mom." She paused. "This really is for the best." I didn't answer. I just went back to packing. That night, after my shift at the hospital, I stopped at St. Mary's Cathedral. It was 2 a.m, and the church was locked, but I sat on the steps outside and looked up at the dark windows. I hadn't been to confession in years, hadn't taken communion, hadn't done any of the things I was supposed to do to maintain my relationship with God. But sitting there in the dark, I prayed anyway. Not for guidance, not for strength, just for clarity. What do I do with this? The deed in the lockbox was power. It was justice, maybe. It was proof that Rebecca didn't own what she thought she owned, that everything she'd done, the calculated transfer of the deed, the renovation that drained my savings, the eviction, was built on sand. I could destroy her with that piece of paper, but should I? I thought about the parable of the prodigal son, which Father Murphy used to preach about when I was a girl. The son who squandered his inheritance and came home broken, and the father who welcomed him anyway, who killed the fatted calf, who celebrated. The part no one talks about is the other son, the one who stayed, the one who did everything right, the one who watched his father throw a party for the brother who'd failed, and felt the unfairness of it like a knife in his gut. I'd always sympathized with that son. Maybe that made me a bad Catholic. Maybe it made me human. I sat there until the sky started to lighten, until the morning cold seeped through my coat and into my bones. Then I went home. No, not home. Back to the house. I couldn't call it home anymore. I had 2 days left. On Thursday morning, Rebecca left early for work. I heard her getting ready, heard her talking to Emma about breakfast, heard the front door close. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then went into the kitchen. Emma was sitting at the table eating toast with too much butter, her legs swinging. "Hi, Grammy," she said around a mouthful of bread. "Hi, sweetheart." I poured myself coffee from the pot Rebecca had left. "You sleep okay?" "I had a dream about a castle, and there was a dragon, but it was a nice dragon." "That sounds like a good dream." "It was." She took another bite of toast. "Grammy, why does Mommy want you to leave?" The question hit like a punch. I sat down across from her, buying time. "What makes you think that?" I asked carefully. "I heard her on the phone. She was talking to Aunt Linda. She said she finally got you to agree to move out." Emma's eyes were too wise for 6 years old. "Did she make you leave?" I could have lied. Should have lied. But looking at Emma's face, so trusting, so confused, I couldn't. "Sort of," I said. "That's mean." "It's complicated, honey." "She's being mean," Emma insisted. "This is your house, too. You bought it." "How do you know that?" "You told me, remember? When we were making cookies, you said you bought this house before Mommy was even born. You said you saved for years and years." I had said that. I'd forgotten, but Emma hadn't. "Well," I said slowly, "things change. Your Mommy needs space, and I understand that. I don't want you to go." "I know, baby, but I'll only be a few blocks away. You can visit whenever you want." Emma pushed her plate away. "It won't be the same." She was right. It wouldn't be. I moved out on Friday afternoon. Pete from the construction company showed up with his truck, even though I hadn't asked him to. He'd heard I was moving and offered to help. "Least I can do, Mrs. Brennan," he said. "After all that money you spent on this place." We loaded my things in 3 trips. It didn't take long. I wasn't taking much. Just the essentials and a few pieces of furniture Rebecca said she didn't need. An old dresser, a reading chair, a lamp my mother had given me when I graduated nursing school. Emma helped carry the small things. She was crying quietly, tears running down her face without any sound. Rebecca stayed inside, watching from the window but not coming out. When the truck was loaded, I stood on the porch, the new porch, with its fresh paint and solid steps, and looked at the house one last time. It really was beautiful now. Rebecca had made it into something worthy of one of those magazines she liked to read at the department store. Better homes and gardens. House beautiful. It just wasn't mine anymore. Emma hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "I love you, Grammy," she whispered. "I love you too, little bear. Promise you'll call me?" "Every day," I said. Another promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Pete drove me to the apartment. He helped me carry everything up 3 flights of stairs, refused the $20 I tried to give him, and left with a tip of his cap. "You take care of yourself, Mrs. Brennan," he said. Then I was alone. I spent the rest of the day unpacking, arranging my few belongings in the small space. The apartment felt like a cell. The walls were beige, the carpet was brown, and the whole place smelled like someone else's cooking. I hung my uniforms in the closet, put my books on the windowsill, set up my small reading chair by the window, where I could watch the street below. That night I made soup on the hot plate and ate it standing up looking out at the city. Portland looked different from here. Smaller, more distant, like I was watching it through the wrong end of a telescope. I thought about the deed in the lockbox, which I'd moved to the apartment. It sat in my closet now, waiting. I thought about Rebecca, probably celebrating her victory with a glass of wine in the living room I used to sit in. I thought about Emma, crying herself to sleep in her pink bedroom. And I thought about what my father had said. Never sign anything without reading it twice. But he'd also said something else. something I'd forgotten until now. It was the day of my mother's funeral, and I'd been angry at God, at cancer, at the unfairness of losing her when I was only 15. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing, my father had said. And you won't know if you did right until years later. Maybe not even then, but you do it anyway. I didn't know if using the deed was the right thing or the wrong thing, but I was starting to realize I had to make a choice. The first week passed in a blur. I worked my shifts, came home to the empty apartment, slept poorly in a bed that felt too small. I kept my promise to Emma. I called every evening at 7, and we'd talk for 10 minutes about her day. Rebecca always answered, always handed the phone to Emma with the same flat politeness, always took it back exactly 10 minutes later. That's enough, Emma. Grammy needs to rest. On the 8th day, I got a call from my bank. A polite woman named Susan informed me that there'd been some unusual activity on my account. What kind of activity? I asked. 3 checks have been cashed in the past week. Large amounts. We just wanted to verify these were authorized transactions. My stomach dropped. How large? $6,000 total. I sat down hard on my reading chair. I didn't write those checks. Are you saying these are fraudulent? I stopped. Can you tell me who they were made out to? To papers rustling. 2 to Meyer and Frank. 1 to Portland Furniture Gallery. Rebecca. Rebecca had my checkbook. I'd left it in my room when I packed, meaning to go back for it, but never getting around to it. She must have found it. Mrs. Brennan, are you there? Yes, I said. Yes, I'm here. Should we file a fraud report? I thought about what that would mean. Police, investigations, Rebecca potentially facing charges. Emma caught in the middle. No, I said. No fraud report. Those checks were authorized. It was a lie, but I couldn't do that to Emma. Not yet. I hung up and sat there in the dim light of my apartment, shaking. $6,000. Nearly a quarter of what remained in my account after the renovation. Gone. She was still taking from me. Even now. Even after everything. I should have been angry. I was angry. But underneath the anger was something worse. I wasn't surprised. I went to the house on Saturday morning. I didn't call first. I just showed up, rang the doorbell like a stranger. Rebecca answered, and her face went pale when she saw me. Mom, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. This isn't a good time. Now, Rebecca. Something in my voice must have scared her because she stepped back and let me in. The house smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Everything was spotless, perfect, magazine ready. Rebecca had bought new furniture, a cream-colored sofa, a glass coffee table, matching lamps. All of it probably paid for with my money. Where's Emma? I asked. At a friend's house. Birthday party. Rebecca crossed her arms. What's this about? I reached into my purse and pulled out the bank statement I'd had them print for me. I held it out. This is about $6,000 you stole from me. Her face went red. I didn't steal anything. You took my checkbook and forged my signature. You left it here. I assumed. You assumed nothing. You took it because you thought you could get away with it. I took a step closer. What did you buy, Rebecca? More furniture? New clothes? What was worth stealing from your mother? Don't be so dramatic. You would have given me the money anyway if I'd asked. But you didn't ask. You just took it. We stood there, facing each other across the new coffee table, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She thought she deserved it. Mom, she said, her voice sharp, you need to let this go. You're being irrational. Irrational? Yes. You're upset about the move, I get it. But you can't just show up here and accuse me of... I want my checkbook back, now. She stared at me for a long moment, then went upstairs. She came back with the checkbook and thrust it at me. Here, happy? I took it and flipped through it. 5 checks were missing. Not 3. You cashed 5 checks. So, the bank only called me about 3. She shrugged. The others haven't cleared yet. How much more? $4,000. $10,000. She'd stolen $10,000 from me. I felt something inside me snap. Not break, snap. Like a bone that's been under pressure too long. You need to pay me back, I said quietly. Rebecca laughed. Actually laughed. With what money, Mom? I'm barely making ends meet as it is. That's not my problem. Actually, it is. You're the one who chose to spend all your money on this house. I didn't force you. You manipulated me. You transferred the deed without telling me, then convinced me to renovate, then kicked me out the moment it was done. I gave you a place to live for 3 years. For free. Maybe you should be thanking me. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. This wasn't the little girl I'd raised. This wasn't even the angry teenager who'd slammed doors and screamed that she hated me. This was someone else entirely. Someone hard and calculating and empty of anything resembling love. Okay, I said. Rebecca blinked. Okay, what? Okay, you're right. I should be grateful. I put the checkbook back in my purse. I'll go now. She looked suspicious. That's it? That's it. I walked to the door, put my hand on the knob. Then I stopped and turned back. Rebecca, I said, do you remember when you were 7 and you stole a candy bar from the Safeway? Her face went confused. What? You took a Milky Way and put it in your pocket. The store manager caught you on your way out. He was going to call the police, but I begged him not to. I paid for the candy bar and made you apologize. Do you remember what I told you on the drive home? She shook her head. I said, when you take something that doesn't belong to you, you don't just hurt the person you took it from. You hurt yourself. You become someone you don't want to be. Do you remember what you said? No. You said, I'll never steal again, Mommy. I promise. Rebecca's face hardened. I was 7 years old. Yes, I said, you were. I left. That afternoon, I went to the county recorder's office. It was in the courthouse downtown, an imposing building with marble floors and echoing hallways. I waited in line behind a young couple trying to register their marriage license, both of them glowing with newlywed joy. When it was my turn, I approached the window. A tired-looking clerk with bifocals looked up. Help you? I need to file a deed transfer, I said. A corrected transfer. The original was never properly recorded. I pushed the yellow document through the slot. The clerk picked it up, adjusted his glasses, and read it over. This is from 1954. Yes. And it was never filed? No. He looked at me, then at the deed, then at me again. You're Dorothy Brennan? I am. And you're trying to establish that you're the rightful owner of... He checked the address. 1247 Hawthorne Street. Yes. He studied the document more carefully, pulled out a file, compared it to something on his computer, frowned. Ma'am, we have a deed on file for this property showing Rebecca Cassidy as the current owner, filed in March of this year. I know, but that deed was based on a transfer from me. And I never legally owned the property because the original transfer was never recorded, which means Miss Cassidy's deed is invalid. The clerk's frown deepened. He called over a supervisor, a woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. They conferred in low voices, looking at documents, typing on the computer. Other people in line behind me started to shift impatiently. Finally, the supervisor looked up. Mrs. Brennan, this is a complex situation. The original owner, Joseph Kowalski, died in 1955. His estate was settled without any claim to this property because everyone assumed the transfer had been completed. If what you're saying is true, that the deed was never properly filed, then the property has been in limbo for over 20 years. So, who owns it? I asked. Legally? It's unclear. It would likely revert to the Kowalski estate. Except that estate no longer exists. You'd have a strong claim as the intended recipient of the transfer. Miss Cassidy's claim would be invalid, but this would need to be settled in court. How long would that take? Months, possibly years. And it would cost, she paused, a fair amount in legal fees. I stood there, absorbing this. I'd thought the deed was a simple solution, a trump card, but it was just the opening move in a much longer game. What do I do? I asked. You can file a claim to the property, but I'd recommend speaking to a lawyer first. This is going to get messy. I took the deed back, thanked them, and left. Outside, the October sun was bright and cold. I stood on the courthouse steps and watched people hurry past. Lawyers in suits, families dealing with traffic tickets, couples getting marriage licenses. Everyone with their own problems, their own crises, their own impossible choices. I thought about what a court battle would mean. Lawyers, depositions. Rebecca and I sitting on opposite sides of a courtroom, fighting over a house neither of us could afford to lose. Emma in the middle, torn between us. Is that what I wanted? To win the house, but lose my granddaughter? I sat down on the steps, suddenly exhausted. I was 63 years old. I was tired. I'd worked my entire life, saved every penny, sacrificed everything. And for what? To end up alone in a beige apartment with thin walls, fighting with my daughter over property lines and legal technicalities. A young woman walked past, pushing a stroller. Inside was a baby, maybe 6 months old, laughing at nothing in particular. The woman saw me watching and smiled. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said. "Yes," I said. "It is." She walked on, and I watched her go. Watched her baby wave its small fists at the sky. I thought about Emma at her friend's birthday party, probably eating too much cake, laughing with the other children, still innocent of everything ugly happening between her mother and grandmother. I thought about what she'd said. "This is your house too. You bought it." And I thought about the choice in front of me. I could fight. I could hire a lawyer, file a claim, drag Rebecca through court. I could win. The supervisor had said I had a strong case. I could take back what was mine, force Rebecca out of the house she'd stolen from me, prove that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. And I could destroy whatever fragile relationship remained between us in the process. Or I could let it go. I could walk away. I could keep working, keep living in my small apartment, keep calling Emma every night at 7. I could choose peace over justice. But was that really peace? Or was it just giving up? I didn't know. I sat there on those courthouse steps for a long time, the deed in my purse, the October sun warming my face, and I still didn't know what to do. That night I went back to St. Mary's. This time the church was open. Friday evening mass had just ended, and a few people were still leaving. I slipped inside and sat in a pew near the back, in the shadows. The church smelled like incense and old wood and centuries of prayers. I'd been baptized here, made my first communion here, married Rebecca's father here. It was as close to a home as anywhere else. Father Murphy was extinguishing candles at the altar. He was old now, must have been close to 80, but he still moved with the careful precision of a man who'd performed these rituals 10,000 times. I waited until he was done, then approached. "Father?" He turned, squinted at me in the dim light. "Dorothy. Dorothy Brennan." "Yes, Father." "My goodness, I haven't seen you in years." He smiled and his face creased into 1,000 wrinkles. "How are you, child?" Child? I was 63 years old, and he still called me child. I stopped. "I don't know." He studied my face and seemed to understand. "Come, sit with me." We sat in the front pew. He didn't ask what was wrong, just waited. So I told him. Everything. The house, the renovation, Rebecca's betrayal, the stolen money, the deed. All of it poured out of me in a rush, words I'd been holding back for weeks. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I want to make her pay," I said. The honesty of it surprised me. I want her to lose everything the way she made me lose everything. I want her to know what it feels like. "Do you?" "Yes." I paused. "No, I don't know." He nodded. "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart tells me I'm tired. That I've given everything I have, and it wasn't enough. That I don't know how to forgive someone who isn't sorry. Forgiveness isn't for people who are sorry," Father Murphy said gently. "That's not forgiveness. That's just accepting an apology. Real forgiveness is for people who will never apologize, who don't even think they've done wrong. That's when forgiveness costs something." So I'm just supposed to let her get away with it?" "I didn't say that. Justice and forgiveness aren't opposites, Dorothy. You can pursue what's right and still have mercy in your heart. The question is, what are you pursuing? The house or your daughter?" I looked at the altar, at the cross hanging above it, at the figure of Christ with his arms spread wide. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I whispered. "You don't have to decide right now," Father Murphy said. "But you do have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Not for Rebecca, for yourself, and for that little granddaughter of yours." He stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Pray on it. And remember, God doesn't ask us to be perfect. He asks us to try." I sat there long after he left, surrounded by the silence of the empty church, and slowly, painfully, I began to understand what I had to do. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed in my beige apartment, listening to the couple next door argue about whose turn it was to do the dishes, and I thought about Father Murphy's words. "What are you pursuing? The house or your daughter?" The answer should have been simple. My daughter, of course. Family over property. Love over revenge. But it wasn't that simple, because pursuing Rebecca, trying to save her, trying to maintain some relationship with her, had cost me everything. How many more times was I supposed to sacrifice myself on the altar of her indifference? At 3 a.m, I got up and made tea. I sat in my reading chair by the window and watched the street below. A drunk stumbled past, singing something off-key. A cat prowled between parked cars. The city breathed and moved even in the dark hours, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its apartments and houses. I thought about my mother, who died when I was 15. She'd been sick for 2 years. Breast cancer, back when they couldn't do much about it except cut and pray. Near the end, when the morphine couldn't touch the pain anymore, she'd called me to her bedside. "Dottie," she'd said, her voice thin as paper. "Promise me something. Anything, Mama. Don't waste your life being angry. It'll eat you alive from the inside." I'd promised, and I'd kept that promise mostly. I'd worked hard, raised Rebecca alone, built a life out of nothing but determination and double shifts. I hadn't let anger consume me. But now, sitting in this apartment I didn't want thinking about the house I'd lost and the daughter who'd betrayed me, I could feel it growing. A dark seed of bitterness, taking root. I could fight Rebecca. I could win. The supervisor at the county office had been clear. I had a strong case. I could take everything from her the way she'd taken everything from me, and I would become exactly like her in the process. The realization hit me like cold water. If I went to war over this house, if I dragged Rebecca through court, if I fought for what was rightfully mine, I wouldn't be pursuing justice. I'd be pursuing revenge. And revenge would turn me into someone I didn't want to be, someone my mother wouldn't recognize. I sat there as the sky began to lighten, as the drunk singing faded into the distance, as the cat disappeared into an alley. And I made my decision. Not because it was easy, not because Rebecca deserved it, not even because it was the right thing to do, though maybe it was, but because I deserved better than to spend the rest of my life consumed by bitterness. I called a lawyer on Monday morning. His name was Samuel Chen, and he'd been recommended by one of the nurses at the hospital, whose sister had gone through a messy divorce. His office was small but tidy, in a building downtown that smelled like coffee and photocopier toner. Mr. Chen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with careful hands and kind eyes. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Brennan, you have an excellent case. The deed was never properly filed, which means your daughter's claim to ownership is built on a faulty foundation. We could file a quiet title action, establish your rightful ownership, and potentially recover damages for the money she stole. How long would it take? 8 months to a year, probably. Maybe longer if she contests it, which she likely would. And it would cost several $1,000s. But given the value of the property, it would be worth it. That house, even in its pre-renovation state, was probably worth $40,000. Now, probably $60, maybe more." I nodded slowly. "Mr. Chen, if I won, if the court said the house was mine, what would happen to my daughter?" "She'd have to vacate. We could possibly negotiate some kind of settlement. But ultimately, she'd lose the property. And my granddaughter," he paused, "your granddaughter would go with her mother, presumably, unless there were custody issues. But that's a different matter entirely." I sat there in his neat office, with its law books and framed diplomas, and I thought about Emma, about her tears when I'd moved out, about the way she'd helped carry my things, so small and trying to be brave. "Mr. Chen," I said, "I don't want to pursue legal action." He blinked. "I'm sorry. I don't want to take my daughter to court. Mrs. Brennan, with all due respect, you have every right." "I know, but I don't want to." I stood up. "What I want is for you to draft a legal document, a transfer of any claim I might have to the property at 1247 Hawthorne Street from me to Rebecca Cassidy. No conditions, no strings attached. Can you do that?" He stared at me like I'd suggested we burn down the courthouse. "You want to give her the house, after everything she's done?" "Yes, Mrs. Brennan." "Mr. Chen." I met his eyes. "How much will it cost for you to draft that document?" He was quiet for a moment. $200. "Then that's what I'd like to hire you to do." He studied me, and I saw the moment he decided to stop arguing. Some battles aren't worth fighting, even when you know you're right. "I'll have it ready by Friday," he said. I told Emma first. I called her at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, like always, and after we'd talked about her day, she'd gotten a star on her spelling test. I asked if I could visit on Saturday. "Really?" Her voice went bright with hope. "You'll come here?" "If it's okay with your mom." "I'll ask her." Muffled sounds as she put her hand over the phone. Then, quieter. "She says okay." We hung up and I sat there holding the phone, my heart pounding. I hadn't been back to the house since the confrontation with Rebecca. Part of me never wanted to see it again. But I needed to do this right, face to face, like adults, like someone who'd chosen forgiveness over bitterness. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. November had arrived, and Portland's signature gray was settling in for the winter. I dressed carefully, my good slacks, a sweater Rebecca had given me 2 Christmases ago, my church shoes. I wanted to look put together, dignified. I took the bus to Hawthorne Street. I could have walked, but my knees weren't what they used to be, and I needed to conserve my energy. As the bus rolled through familiar neighborhoods, I thought about all the times I'd walked these streets, coming home from the hospital at dawn, taking Emma to the park, walking to the corner store for milk. Every street corner held a memory. Every tree was a marker of my life. The house looked beautiful in the morning light. Rebecca had planted mums in the front bed, yellow and burgundy, bright against the pale paint. The new porch gleamed. The windows sparkled. It looked like a picture from one of those magazines. It looked nothing like the home I remembered. I rang the doorbell. Emma answered. throwing her arms around my waist before I could even say hello. "Grammy, you came." Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? Rebecca appeared behind her, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked tired, I noticed. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Mom," she said stiffly. "Come in." I followed them inside. The house smelled like coffee and something baking. Cookies, maybe. Emma pulled me toward the kitchen, chattering about a project she was doing for school. Something about the solar system. "I'm doing Saturn because it has the coolest rings," she said. "Mrs. Peterson said I could use glitter." "That sounds wonderful, honey." Rebecca poured coffee without asking if I wanted any. We sat at the kitchen table, the new table, sleek and modern, and for a moment nobody said anything. "Emma," Rebecca finally said, "why don't you go play upstairs for a bit? Grammy and I need to talk." "But I want to show her my project." "Later, baby, go on." Emma looked between us, her face falling, then trudged upstairs. We heard her bedroom door close. Rebecca wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "So, what do you want?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope Mr. Chen had given me. I placed it on the table between us. "What's this?" Rebecca asked. "Open it." She did, slowly, pulling out the legal document. I watched her face as she read it. Confusion first, then shock, then something I couldn't quite identify. "This is..." She looked up at me. "You're giving me the house?" "Yes." "Why?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all week. Why give her anything? Why let her win? Why reward betrayal with grace? "Because you're my daughter," I said simply, "and because Emma needs a home." "But you said..." "The deed wasn't filed. You could fight this. You could take it back. I could. So why don't you?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the dark circles, the tight set of her jaw, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held the document. And I realized something I should have seen sooner. She wasn't happy. Despite getting everything she wanted, despite winning, despite having the house and her independence, she wasn't happy. "Rebecca," I said gently, "when was the last time you slept through the night?" She blinked. "What?" "You look exhausted. When was the last time you weren't worried about money, about the house, about whether you made the right choice?" She looked away. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're drowning. And you have been, for years. Ever since Frank left. Maybe even before that. I don't need your analysis. I'm not analyzing. I'm just seeing you. Really seeing you. And what I see is someone who's scared and tired and doing her best with what she has." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what it's been like. Raising Emma alone. Working retail, which barely pays anything. Living in that house while it fell apart around us. Knowing I couldn't afford to fix it, Her voice broke. "I just wanted something better for her. Something stable. So you took it from me." "Yes." She wiped her eyes roughly. "Yes, I did. And you want to know what's really awful? I don't even regret it. I should, but I don't. Because for the first time in years, Emma has a nice house. She has her own room that doesn't have water stains on the ceiling. She has a place she can be proud of. At my expense." "Yes," she said again, meeting my eyes. "At your expense. And I know that makes me a terrible person. I know you probably hate me. But I can't undo it now. The house is fixed. Emma is happy. And I don't know how to feel sorry for that." We sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere upstairs, Emma was humming. "Rebecca," I said finally, "I don't hate you. You should. Probably. But I don't." I reached across the table and took her hand. She flinched but didn't pull away. "You're my daughter, and I love you, even when you make it very, very hard to." A sob broke out of her. Just one, sharp and sudden, like something had cracked. She put her head down on the table and cried, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I got up and put my arms around her, and she cried into my shoulder the way she used to when she was little and had scraped her knee or lost a toy. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "I know, baby, I know." We stayed like that for a long time, and slowly, like ice melting, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not forgiveness, not entirely, but the beginning of it. A crack letting light in. After Rebecca composed herself, we sat and talked. Really talked, for the first time in years. I told her about the nights I'd spent in the basement during the renovation, about finding the deed, about the meeting with Mr. Chen. She told me about the mounting bills, about the loans she'd taken out, about the credit card debt that was crushing her. "I thought if I fixed the house, I could refinance," she said. "Use the equity to pay off everything. But the bank said I needed more time establishing credit history. So I'm stuck with all these bills and no way to pay them." "The checks you forged," I said. "The $10,000. Did that help?" She laughed bitterly. "It bought me 3 months. Maybe. Then I'll be right back where I started." "Rebecca, why didn't you just ask me for help?" "Because you already gave everything. You worked yourself to death to buy this house, and then you spent your life savings to fix it. What more could I possibly ask for?" "The truth," I said quietly. "You could have asked for the truth. You could have told me you were struggling. We could have figured something out together. I didn't think you'd understand. I'm your mother. Understanding you is literally my job." She smiled through her tears. "Some job. I haven't made it easy." "No," I agreed. "You haven't." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Rebecca looked at the document on the table. "I can't accept this," she said. "The house. It's not right." "It's already done, mister. Chen filed it yesterday." "Then we'll unfile it." "Rebecca." I took her hand again. "The house is yours. Free and clear. No conditions. It's my gift to Emma. To both of you." "But where will you live?" "I have an apartment. It's small, but it's enough." "You shouldn't have to live in some apartment." "I choose to live there. There's a difference." I squeezed her hand. "Listen to me. This house was supposed to be a home for our family, and it will be. For you and Emma. That's enough for me." Rebecca looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Why are you being so nice to me? After everything I did?" I thought about my mother, dying in that hospital bed. About my father, teaching me to read papers twice. About Father Murphy, talking about the cost of forgiveness. "Because someone has to stop the cycle," I said. "Someone has to choose grace instead of grudges. And I'm tired, Rebecca. I'm so tired of being angry." She nodded slowly. "What about the money I took? Pay me back when you can. No rush, no interest." "I don't deserve this." "Probably not," I said honestly. "But that's the thing about grace. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing love even when it's hard." Emma came down eventually. She must have been listening at the top of the stairs because she came into the kitchen with tears on her face and threw her arms around both of us. "I heard you say sorry, Mommy," she said. "Does that mean Grammy isn't mad anymore?" Rebecca looked at me. "No, sweetheart," I said. "Grammy's not mad anymore. Can you come back and live with us?" I laughed softly. "No, baby. I like my apartment, but I'll visit all the time. And you can visit me too. Every day? As often as your mother will let you?" Rebecca wiped her eyes. "How about Sunday dinners? Every week. Here, I'll cook." "You'll cook?" I raised an eyebrow. Rebecca had never been much for cooking. "Okay, fine. You'll cook. But here, with us, as a family." A family. It had been so long since we'd felt like one. "Sunday dinners sound perfect," I said. Over the next few months, things slowly healed. Not perfectly. Nothing ever heals perfectly. But enough. I kept my apartment. I kept my job. I kept my routine. But every Sunday, I took the bus to Hawthorne Street and cooked dinner in the kitchen I'd paid to renovate. Rebecca would set the table. Emma would do her homework at the table while I chopped vegetables. We'd eat together, the three of us, and talk about our weeks. Sometimes Frank would come up in conversation. Emma asked about him once, and Rebecca answered honestly that he'd had problems, that sometimes people hurt the ones they love without meaning to, that leaving had been the right choice. "Do you miss him?" Emma asked. "Sometimes," Rebecca said. "But mostly I'm glad it's just us girls." Emma seemed satisfied with that. In December, Rebecca paid me back $200. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She slipped it into my purse when she thought I wasn't looking. "I saw that," I said. "I know you did," she said. "I wanted you to." At Christmas, we decorated the house together. Emma was in charge of the tree, which meant it was loaded with ornaments on the bottom half and sparse on top. Rebecca bought a new angel for the top, a beautiful porcelain thing that probably cost too much. "We needed a fresh start," she said when I raised my eyebrow at it. We went to Christmas Eve Mass at St. Mary's, all three of us, dressed in our Sunday best, sitting in the same pew my mother had sat in decades ago. Father Murphy saw us and smiled so broadly I thought his face might crack. Emma sat between us, swinging her legs, singing along to the carols even though she didn't know all the words. When it came time for communion, I went forward. I hadn't taken communion in years, but somehow it felt right. As I knelt at the altar rail, I thought about the past year, about loss and anger and the long, painful journey toward forgiveness, about the difference between what we deserve and what we choose to give. The host dissolved on my tongue, and I felt something shift inside me. Not healing, exactly, but peace. A quiet sense that I'd made the right choice, even if it had cost me everything. In February, I got a letter from Mr. Chen. The county had officially recognized the deed transfer. The house at 1247 Hawthorne Street was legally and officially Rebecca's. No more gray areas, no more questions. I put the letter in my lockbox, next to the old deed and my mother's rosary and all the other artifacts of my life. Then I went to work. The thing about forgiveness is that it's not a single moment. It's not a decision you make once, and then it's done. It's a choice you make over and over again, every time the anger tries to creep back in. I still had bad days. Days when I came home to my small apartment and felt the loss of the house like a physical ache. Days when I calculated how much money I'd spent on the renovation and felt sick. Days when I saw Rebecca wearing new clothes and wondered if they were bought with my forged checks. On those days, I would sit in my reading chair by the window and remember what Father Murphy had said. God doesn't ask us to be perfect. He asks us to try, and I would try again. It was April when Rebecca came to my apartment for the first time. She'd called that morning, asking if she could visit after work. Something in her voice made me nervous. She arrived at 6, still in her Meyer and Frank uniform, looking anxious. "What's wrong?" I asked as I let her in. "Nothing's wrong. She looked around the apartment, and I saw her face fall. "Oh, Mom, this place is small?" I was going to say depressing. I laughed. "It's not so bad once you get used to it." She sat in my reading chair, and I made tea. When I brought it over, she took the cup, but didn't drink. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the house." My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. She's going to sell it, or refinance it, or do something else that proves I made a mistake trusting her. "What about it?" I asked carefully. "There are 3 bedrooms. Emma only needs 1. I'm using one. The 3rd bedroom, your old room, is just sitting empty." "Okay. I want you to take it back." I blinked. "What?" "Your room. I want you to move back in. Not permanently. I know you like your independence, but keep your apartment and use the house too. You could stay over on weekends or whenever you wanted. It would be good for Emma to have you around more. And honestly," she looked down at her tea, "it would be good for me too." I didn't know what to say. I'd given up the house. I'd made peace with that, and now she was offering it back? Rebecca, I can't... Yes, you can. The house is legally mine, which means I get to decide who lives there. And I'm deciding that you do. At least, part-time. Why? She looked up, and her eyes were clear. Because it's your house too. It always has been. I just forgot that for a while. I felt tears prick my eyes. You really want me there? Yes. Emma and I both do. We've been talking about it. She misses you, Mum. We both do. I thought about my small apartment with its thin walls and beige carpet. I thought about the house on Hawthorne Street with its gleaming floors and fresh paint and the room that used to be mine. I thought about Sunday dinners and Christmas trees and the possibility of rebuilding something I'd thought was broken beyond repair. Okay, I said. Yes, I'd like that. Rebecca smiled. Really smiled. Bright and genuine. Good, because I already told Emma, and she's been making welcome home signs all week. I moved back into the house in May. Not fully. I kept my apartment, kept my independence, kept my space. But I started staying at the house 3 or 4 nights a week. My old room had been repainted a soft blue, and Rebecca had moved my old furniture back in. My reading chair by the window. My dresser with the pull that stuck. My lamp. I saved everything, Rebecca said when I saw it. I couldn't throw it away. We fell into a new routine. I'd stay at the apartment on my work nights, come to the house on my days off. Emma and I would bake cookies or work on her homework or walk to the park to feed the ducks, just like we used to. Rebecca would come home from work and find us in the kitchen, flour on our noses, laughing about something silly. Sometimes I'd catch her watching us with an expression I'd never seen before. Not resentment, not obligation. Something softer. Love, maybe. Or its beginning. In July, on a warm Sunday evening after dinner, Rebecca and I sat on the front porch while Emma chased fireflies in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The maple trees rustled in the breeze. "Mom," Rebecca said quietly, "I never really apologized. Not properly. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me. "What I did was wrong. All of it. Taking the deed, pressuring you into the renovation, kicking you out, stealing your money. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway." "Rebecca!" "Let me finish." She took a breath. "I've spent my whole life being angry at you for working so much, for not being there, for choosing your job over me. But the truth is, you were doing the best you could. You were trying to give me a better life, and I never appreciated it. I just resented you. You were a child. Children don't understand. I'm 33 years old, Mom. At some point, I have to stop blaming you for my bad decisions." She wiped her eyes. "You gave me everything, and I threw it back in your face, and you forgave me anyway. I don't know how you did that. I thought about all the nights I'd spent wrestling with that decision, all the anger and hurt and the slow, painful choice to let it go. I did it because the alternative was worse," I said honestly. "I could hold on to the anger and lose you completely, or I could forgive you and maybe get my daughter back." "You got her back," Rebecca said, her voice thick with tears. "I promise, you got her back." We sat in silence, watching Emma run through the grass, her laughter carrying on the warm air. "I've been thinking about going back to school," Rebecca said after a while. "Maybe get a degree in business, see if I can move up from the cosmetics counter. Maybe even open my own shop someday." "That sounds wonderful. I'm scared I'm too old." "You're 33. You're a baby," she laughed. "Says the woman who's still working night shifts. At 64. 63, I corrected. "And I like my job." "You're going to work until you drop dead, aren't you?" "Probably." She shook her head, smiling. "You're impossible. I raised you, didn't I? I learned from the best." Emma came running up the porch steps, breathless and glowing. I caught one. I caught a firefly. She opened her hands slightly, and we could see the soft glow pulsing between her fingers. Make a wish, I told her. What should I wish for? Whatever your heart wants most. She closed her eyes, her face serious with concentration. Then she opened her hands and the firefly lifted into the air, blinking as it flew away into the darkening sky. What did you wish for? Rebecca asked. Emma smiled. I can't tell you, or it won't come true. But she looked at both of us, at Rebecca and me sitting side by side on the porch of the house that had seen so much pain and was now filled with so much hope. And I thought I knew what she'd wished for. The same thing I would have wished for. That this would last. That we'd found our way back to each other. That the mistakes of the past wouldn't define our future. That we were, finally, truly home. I still work at St. Vincent Hospital. I still live in my apartment 4 nights a week. I still drink my tea from the blue cup. But now, 3 nights a week, I sleep in my old room in the house on Hawthorne Street. I wake up to Emma jumping on my bed, begging me to make pancakes. I have coffee with Rebecca before she leaves for work. I walk to the corner store for milk and wave to the neighbors who've known me for decades. The house still creaks. The pipes still groan. But it's home. Not because it belongs to me legally. It doesn't. Not because I have any claim to it. I don't. But because I chose to love the people in it more than I loved being right. And in the end, that's the only thing that matters. Last Sunday after dinner, I was washing dishes while Rebecca dried and Emma put them away. It was a small moment, domestic and ordinary. But as I looked at my daughter's hands working beside mine and heard my granddaughter singing something off-key and joyful, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong, it nearly knocked me over. I'd lost the house. I'd lost my savings. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained something infinitely more valuable. A second chance. Not everyone gets one of those. Rebecca caught me staring and smiled. What? Nothing, I said. Just thinking. About what? I thought about my father, about my mother, about all the people who'd shaped me and taught me and pushed me toward this moment. About how lucky I am, I said. And I meant it. There's a prayer I've started saying every night before bed. It's not from any book or liturgy, just something I pieced together from the fragments of faith I've carried all my life for the house that held us and the home we're building, for the daughter who lost her way and found it again, for the granddaughter who reminded me why any of this matters, for the grace to forgive when forgiveness seemed impossible, for the strength to choose love over bitterness, for second chances and third chances and all the chances that follow. Thank you. Amen. Simple, imperfect, true. Like everything worth having, it's a work in progress. But it's mine, and that's enough. I spent $23,000 of my savings to renovate the house where I lived with my daughter, until one day she said, "Now you can pack your things and get out of here." But what she didn't know was that